Hello, this is Mark from I'm Organic Gardening, located in Zone 6B. It's currently the end of March, and today's video is going to be about how to start a garden nature's way. Now, this is also part 8 of the soil series, how to grow nutrient-dense fruits and vegetables. So let's get started. So where to start first? A few things that come into mind is what's your USDA zone, so you know your last frost date and your first frost date. Also, too, have a water source nearby. You're probably going to need some type of watering through your gardening season. And we're also going to need 6 hours of direct sunlight throughout the growing season per day. So in my zone 6B, my last frost date is May 15th. Now I usually wait a little bit longer. So where we are currently now is around the end of March. So between the end of March and May 15th, I got a good, let's say 45 to almost 60 days before I put my transplants in the ground that I've grown in another location. Now, what's nice about this is that I can get an established root even in this short period of time to help regenerate my soil. So the first thing I want to look for when I go outside is not so much the timing, but it's also the soil temperature. So my current soil temperature is about 47 degrees Fahrenheit. So I have a good choice to use my winter rye, and also I'm going to be using New Zealand white clover. Here's a very good chart showing a lot of information to answer a lot of questions that you have about sowing cover crops. Now, what this does, and this is listed on my Facebook page also that you can print out a copy from. Now, this is from Johnny Seeds. Now, it will give you the type of cover crop that you're looking for, sowing season, minimum germination, temp, hardiness zone, growth rate, fast, medium, and slow, how many seeds per 1,000 square feet, per acre, seeding depth, and whether the cover crop fixes nitrogen or not. A good listing of all the information that basically gets you started with your cover crops. So my first cover crop I'm going to be using is New Zealand white clover. And you can sow it any time from spring to summer at 40 degrees Fahrenheit soil temperature, and the hardiness zone is 4. And again here, a key point is that it's very slow growing, but it also fixes nitrogen. I'm not worried about the nitrogen part of the clover. Basically, it's an added bonus. Now the next one I'm going to be using is winter rye. I can plant any time at 34 degrees Fahrenheit soil temperature, hardiness zone 3, and then also the growth rate is medium. So very good to get things established, and I'm going to plant that up and I'll show you how to do it. So before we sow our cover crop seeds to grow a living mulch and rebuild our soil for the next 45 days, we also have to have a plan right now too. How are we going to maintain it or terminate it later on when we don't wish to have it in certain areas that we want to grow our vegetables in? So you have to think about that ahead of time. Now, cutting the cover crop down right at soil level, sometimes it will grow back, so you have to go down a little bit further. You might have to go down a ½ inch and knock off that crown of that cover crop, or where it expands out of the top of the soil. You have to remove that so it doesn't grow back. Now you can do other things. You can lay cardboard on top. You can put even wood chips on top after you cut it down. You can put leaf mold on top, because what the thing is with the cover crop right now, what you're trying to do is you're trying to build that soil. You're trying to actually till it naturally. So all those roots, it's not so much what's growing on top. All those roots in the ground is basically opening up that soil more than you can ever do by tilling it or nothing else either. That's how nature grows with things. It actually, the roots of the plants are the tillers in the soil and will make that soil stronger than humans can ever possibly do. So here's a good example of what we're going to be doing for the next 45 days with the cover crop seeds. Now this is just a regular ordinary grass that is growing in my garden, and we can consider it a weed. Now what we're going to do, if we wish to, we can cut this off right at soil level here so it doesn't do anything. But I want to show you by just pulling this out. Now I'm not suggesting to do this, I just want to show you an example how well this grows soil. Now the roots are very deep because it grew over winter. And you can see here how all this here with these very fine roots has started making soil aggregates and also growing mycorrhizal fungi, possibly not in this grass if it was something else, but you can see here how nice and loose and tilled that soil is. So you don't have to do anything for future. That cover crop is going to be doing all this here, and all these roots from just this little clump. You can see how beautiful all this is right in here, that it's just making all these little soil aggregates here in the soil, allowing water to drain through. And it's so, I wish you could feel this, it's so nice and light and fluffy that it's just pure organic matter mixed in with that sand, silt, and clay. All the roots here are key. They're going to die off eventually after we terminate them, but basically you're adding all this organic matter. It's determined over the years that you're going to get more organic matter in the soil than what you do actually on top. You actually get more benefits of organic matter from all the roots dying in your ground than you will from, let's say, foliage on the top that dies off. Because the worms will eat that, making it castings, and they'll do a fantastic job that way. It's part of the whole ecosystem. But here you have this nice clump of roots that is basically tilling your soil for free, and again, it will do it so much better than humans can possibly ever do. So how to remove certain weeds in the garden, something like this. What you see here in the picture, this is actually the beginning of something called goldenrod to grow. Now it has a decent sized taproot on it, and if you just try to kill it off like so, taking the shovel and cutting the crown off, it's okay. It will come back though, so let's see if we can find that taproot in here. Just a little bit further down. Here it is. Now you can see that it has a nice single taproot with very little fibers like that grass here. You can see that's just starting here, that taproot, and going down. In this particular case, you're better off pulling them out or removing the whole thing instead of just sliding off. But most of your weeds that were like that fine grass, you can just slice off at the top like I did, and they will not grow back. So if you see something like this is not considered a weed because it belongs to the herb family. This is called purple dead nettle, and it grows in my area and along the coastline all the way down south. And there's also another variety that's very similar to this also too. But what it does is it grows mycorrhizal fungi all over winter because it has a permanent living root in the ground all winter long. It doesn't even have to have the green on top. And you can see that it's flowering now too. That will attract bees, honeybirds. It has a beautiful nectar in there for them, and it's something free of charge that can grow in your garden. I wish I could harvest enough seeds of this to grow a large mass area of this and then try planting in it in the future. I will see no problem in doing that, and I'm actually working on that experiment again in the future. And also, here's a good tip too, is that anything that you consider a weed, look online and Google it and find out if it's truly a weed or not, if it's classified as a herb. And if it is, that will grow mycorrhizal fungi in your soil, and don't consider it a weed then. Again, do some research. If it's considered an herb or for medical purposes, it's also being beneficial to your garden. So it's not considered weeds out there. So let's now talk about adding organic matter to the soil when building a raised bed, or even just as a top dressing. Now, coffee grounds you don't want to leave on the top surface and dry out. Now, coffee grounds are great. They're free of charge to get at your local coffee shop, and they'll be more than happy to give them away to you. And I'll also post a bulletin. And a lot of people think there's a huge myth about when you use coffee grounds that it will make your soil acidic. It does not. And in this bulletin that I'll provide a link for, it's from the university. It went over all the beneficial things that coffee grounds can do for your soil. And the main point they want to point out, it doesn't make your soil acidic. Just be careful of certain organic matters like manure and hay and straw, because they can have pesticides in them, and they can have also medicine in there that they gave the cows, and it actually might hurt your garden. And with the hay and straw in that manure sometimes too, that they brought that in from other fields that they used like a chemical on or Roundup on, and that will affect your garden too. There's several people actually on gardening channels that had this problem in the past where they brought in hay or manure and it would actually ruin their garden or actually delay the growth of or stunted the growth of their plants. One of the best manures you can use right away is rabbit manure. It's great for the garden and it will actually start growing or building your soil immediately. And just a good tip of how much to use, you can always use about a quarter of the volume of what you're adding into the soil. So if you have at least say 4 inches deep that you're making a mound or working in the ground your very first time when you're gardening, you can add in at least an inch of coffee grounds because it's a quarter or 1/4 in that 4 inches that you're going to be using in the soil. So when starting a garden, before you put your cover crops down to enhance the soil, to grow the soil, one of the first things you should look at is how compact your soil is. If it's been around your house and machinery has been used to build a pool in the backyard, or there's lots of rocks in the soil, or whatever the circumstances is, or there was a dog run there and it's compacted that soil, you're going to have to do some kind of mechanical help to start with. Now, what you might be saying also too is that, oh, I thought this was maybe possibly a no-till system that you're going to be doing. It is. The first time you work your garden, it's okay to move the soil around because the only thing you have right now in that soil, in the ground, and in my soil right here, it's a little bit different than yours, is that you have only bacteria in there. You have very little fungi. You have probably 1 billion bacteria to 1 fungi. Now, what you have to do is create a balance to equal amounts between bacteria and fungi in the soil. And that's what's going to happen when you plant a living root in that ground and grow a cover crop. Now, with that in mind, you should always, I'm just going to throw this out there, you should always try to build a raised bed and at least 8 inches tall from your normal ground height of your soil. Right off the bat, you're going to have a fantastic garden just to start with, and you can grow multiple things like, your all your types of legumes, your beans, your peas, and that type of thing. And we're going to be planting sugar snap peas along the trellis here in the back. And then later on, we're going to come back and plant tomato plants. And then in front of that, we're going to plant some peppers. So you can enhance that garden every year to grow more and more food of different varieties. So when building a raised bed over here, what I did is I took the soil out of the pathways, put it on top of the other soil here to build that up about 8 inches. Now then I went back in and I filled the pathways in with wood chips. And they're very soft and they'll keep the weeds down in the pathways. But my main bed now over here is about 8 inches tall, so that's a good plan of action to help you get started. So the first thing I'm going to be planting up is sugar snap peas. I'm going to put them on every single one of these trellises. I have 3 of them here. This is the first one at the end of the row. And then there's my second one, and there's the last one up there. And each one is being held up by 4 stakes. Now the first thing I'm going to do is plant up the sugar snap peas right in front of that trellis in a 3-inch wide trench, about, let's say, 1 inch deep. And then we're going to cover that over, and then I'm going to come back and start planting up different areas or test areas in front of each trellis. Each trellis is going to have a different sample, so you can see, like the first one closest to the windmill in the background or the farthest away from you is just going to have New Zealand white clover in it. The next one is going to have New Zealand white clover and winter rye in it mixed together, but in different ways. And I'll explain that further on. And the last one over here, that's closest to me right here, is just going to have purely winter rye in there growing. So let me get started. Now we have all our trenches done in all 3 trellises right down the line there. And now we get to fill them up with some sugar snap peas. And here's what they look like. Now I'm just going to scatter them in the trench. I'm not worried about spacing so much. I've never had a problem with too little or too many over the years. I always plant more. I like a nice healthy crop. So I have my sugar snap peas all in my trench there, and I have about 50 feet of them, and I'm going to be planting tomato plants right in front of them when it's time to plant outside after my last frost date. And this is going to be my first cover crop. And what's nice about this cover crop is I can eat the sugar snap peas that are going to be growing from it. So the cover crop seed I'm going to use in test area 1, that we're going to call it, is New Zealand white clover. And that's the area that is that's 16 feet long with that trellis, that cattle panel trellis in the background there, and it's closest to the driveway in my kitchen garden here. Now what I just did here is I just raked the surface of the soil going down about a ½ inch to kind of rough it up. This way when I spread the seeds they're not going to blow away in the wind, and then I'll rake it again, so I'll give it about a ½ inch in depth, anywhere from 1/4 to a ½ inch in depth, and then I'll water it down so it stays in place. So the reason why I don't use, say, buckwheat or alfalfa right now is that they're frost sensitive, and my last frost date is May 15th. So I plant them now and get a heavy frost, it will kill those roots and plants off, and I'll have to replant again. I can't plant alfalfa and buckwheat until after May 15th for me here in Zone 6B in the state of New Jersey. So be careful not to plant those two particular cover crops items, and it's on the list and on the chart. Anything that says frost sensitive, you cannot plant ahead of time before your last frost date. Here we have a good sample of what New Zealand white clover looks like. It's very fine little seeds, and it's hard to broadcast, so don't worry about it if there clumps an area, because what you can do is you can rake it around afterwards and spread it out more evenly. So areas like this, which too many seeds happen to fall in one area due to the wind, now like I said, you just rake them out and mix them in, and then everything will be good. So in test area number 2, I'm going to plant a combination of winter rye and also New Zealand white clover, but there's going to be a twist to it. I'm not going to mix the seeds together. I'm going to cover the whole area first with New Zealand white clover like I did in test area 1, and then I'm going to go back in and I'll show you. I'm just going to sprinkle a couple seeds in the circles throughout the area, so I'm going to make little like islands of winter rye growing inside all of the New Zealand white clover. So here we have some New Zealand white clover. You can see down below here, actually a little bit on the heavy side. So again, we're just going to rake that up about a 1/4 inch to a ½ inch deep. And now what we're going to do is add some winter rye. We're just going to do this by hand, just in a general area, and we're just going to mix it in like so. So the seeds are below, give it a tap down, and that's all we're going to do. And now this is going to create a little island of New Zealand white clover that's going to be around the outside, and the winter rye is going to grow in the middle. It's going to grow about this tall and just give us something different, so I can show you later on why this is better, because now we have 2 cover crop seeds planted in the same area plus our snap peas in the background here. So I'm just going to take this winter rye and create more islands, about using anywhere from 5 to 10 seeds each in each island, just like I have here, pretty much an island of that purple dead nettle growing in the area that I just raked up and cleaned up, and it's going to do the same type of feature. Now the only thing you have to watch out for in doing this is just do the islands in areas that you're not going to be planting things that you have to get down to the ground with. You don't want an island of winter ryegrass that's going to grow anywhere from 5 inches to say 10 inches tall inside an area that you want to plant in. And then finally, test area number 3, we're going to be using nothing but our winter rye. We're not going to be mixing it with anything else. And we're just going to cover it over the surface and then rake it in at least anywhere from ½ inch to 1 inch deep. Now we have all 3 test areas planted up, and I will keep you updated as everything goes along throughout the next couple months of how the garden is going to do. Now, this process is a lot different than what you probably have seen on YouTube and other gardening channels, and that's okay. What I'm trying to make you be aware of is, let me do the hard work and then you can see the results, and then you can choose whether you wish to change to it or not. And if you do change to it, just start in a small area, like maybe 4 feet by 4 feet, and get used to it, and then over time you can sit back and relax, because it's going to be a lot less work in the future, because the only thing you have to do is just continue to grow a living root in the ground using the C.P.R method that I explained in another video, and everything will be fine. Your plants will just grow better, have more nutrient value to them, and always a good thing to do when you're done planting your seeds up, or you're even transplanting everything, always give your garden a nice drink of water. I want to thank you very much for watching today's video. If you haven't done so, please subscribe, and please give it a big thumbs up if you can. It will really help out my channel. And again, I thank you so very much for watching, and enjoy gardening.